Hello, and welcome to the Legendary Ladies podcast. So, this week we are doing a pilot pod and we're taking it back to the 90s. Totally rad, or whatever. I'm pretending I wasn't alive back then, but I very much was. So, we are actually going to be talking about the ER pilot, which aired in 1994, I believe, September 19th, 1994. Now,
Aired
this
a few
pilot
weeks before I was born.
Oh my God. That's so
Yeah.
funny.
This is where we get the range of our millennialism
It's
on
so
this
true.
podcast, because I was a few years old at that point.
I was also a few years old. I just did the math. I was 8.
Wow. There you go. So you had a memory of this. Maybe airing.
I remembered when ER was a big thing. I
Mhm.
didn't watch it, which was going to be my first question around, which is Danny in our chat says cries in Gen X. But I remember ER being like a huge thing where it was like the ER Friends like double feature. Everybody was watching both of those shows. Everybody like was in love with George Clooney, which I feel like is a modern day phenomenon as well.
That
Sure.
goes for any generation at any time.
All of us still loving George Clooney. I actually wanted to look up like how old was George Clooney in this
How old
ER
was he?
pilot. He was like 33.
Okay.
Well, Mike came in and saw Clooney on the screen and said, "How old is he in this? Younger than us now?" And I was like, "Get out of the room! Get out of the room right now!"
He's almost my age now. Like, he then was almost the age I am now.
Yeah, I
That
feel like
math
George
works great.
Clooney is like one of those people who kind of like looks forever ageless. Like even in ER, you could have told me like George Clooney was in his 20s or his 40s, and I feel like I might have
buy it.
believed you. I'd be
Yeah.
like,
He had a
yeah,
little gray.
gray, but he still looks youthful. Like,
He is, in my opinion, more attractive now than he was then.
I agree. I think most people would say
Yeah.
that about George Clooney. I think he aged well.
very well.
Brace.
But classic Clooney, also great.
Sure.
So-
Wouldn't say no.
Before we hop too far into this, we should remind everybody that if you are a Patreon, you get to join us on these podcasts live at the legendary listener level. This is actually a Patreon requested pilot pod. Fiona requested it. And then we posted that we were going to record it. And she goes, yeah, so it's 1 a.m. in, you know, the UK where I live. So we have Fiona's thoughts to read later, which we're very excited about. But if you... Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I was gonna say, we have some people in the chat. We have Danny and Michael, our Patreon supporters, in the chat, talking away. So if you two want to become a Patreon supporter, you can join us, chat away while we're recording these episodes. We always try to tell you a little bit in advance what we're going to be talking about.
And Danny has watched ER. Seems like they've watched a lot of ER, and Michael has not watched ER, but wanted to hear our thoughts. Which I think we should mention. Have we also seen ER? Like, I know we're talking about our past with it. It ended when I want to say, well, let's see when it ended. It ended
in 2008 or 2009.
I was in high school because I remember like it. You know, it was a show that was definitely in my brain, and I felt like it was promoted a lot.
It went on for 15 seasons. So
like the Law and Order of
medical shows. Yeah, it was really funny because when we were watching this for this podcast, I looked at the first episode and then I went down to season 15 and like looked to see what year that was, because I thought for some reason when I saw 2008, I went, what? Because for some reason I didn't think it lasted that long. For me, like my memory holds ER as like a very like 90s thing, but it lasted almost into the 2010s.
Well, think about even Friends. I think when we were talking about the duo of that show lasted in the mid 2000s too. Like I remember watching the last episode when it aired. So it's, you know, shows that were very 90s kind of bled into the 2000s as well.
Danny says in the chat, it was Grey's Anatomy before Grey's Anatomy.
I definitely caught
that. Oh, it
very
was,
much
but
so.
I mean, Grey's
Anatomy is still chugging. Though. Still chugging along. How long has Grey's Anatomy been on? Like,
I want to say it started when ER ended, right?
oh my God. So apparently Grey's Anatomy started in 2005, which means that there was a period of like 2 or 3 years when Grey's Anatomy and ER were on at the same time.
Huh.
And it has been on Grey's Anatomy for 19 seasons.
Oh my God. And people stay loyal to that show.
People are still watching.
It's the Survivor of dramas. Because, like, you know, if you watch Survivor from season 1, you're probably still watching Survivor.
You're locked in at that point, I feel
exactly.
like.
It's the Law and Order SVU of the medical world. Dr. Lawyer Cop. It's the doctor and the cop.
Yes.
Where's the lawyer show?
What's interesting, too, because I was thinking about, like, what medical shows existed before, like, did ER kind of create the genre? But really, MASH created the genre.
Oh,
so I was like, oh yeah, MASH was probably the first version of ER, but it was a comedy. So I thought that was interesting. And this is the first time, like, in a dramatic sense, I feel like it created this medical
serialized
drama.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah. And realism too, because MASH did have that realism. MASH was very clearly set. It had that realism aspect, but the humor could take you out of that. This did not. This did not shy away from some of the more.
It had humor though.
It does. It does.
So Danny,
it's like real life humor, if that makes sense.
Danny in the chat points out Saint Elsewhere was also, I believe, a medical show. You know what was really funny is that I was trying to look up like a plot summary because there's so many different like little stories in this episode, and I was afraid I was going to forget. And instead what I found was like a Hollywood Reporter review from like 1994, and in the review, because it was like not that long, so I read it, and in the review it was like, this looks like the makings of another Saint Elsewhere. And I was like, was that a medical show? That was my question.
I remember watching this show during the summer times when I was in elementary and middle school. This was that syndicated show that when I was home and my mom worked on Tuesdays and Thursdays, incidentally in the medical field, on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I was just home and I would binge watch ER. But I also remember watching episodes as I got older live. And there are very few shows from when I was a kid where I have very distinctive memories of certain episodes. And it's weird because I don't want to spoil it, but it's also been 20 years.
It's been
There's
a long
an episode where 2 characters get stabbed. And that episode has not left my, like, I remember that moment. I remember the reaction that you have. The way that it's filmed is so great. It's really it's actually a shockingly good scene of 2 of your favorite characters getting stabbed.
Oh no.
Is this the show where there was like a helicopter?
The helicopter. I was going to say that was going to be the next thing I said, Kat. I was going to say, well, didn't this show have some sort of helicopter accident that like took somebody out?
I want to say it's George Clooney because I feel like that.
Was it George Clooney?
I want to say he died, or maybe it's I don't know. Maybe it's the main character. I'm not sure.
I kind of feel like it was the main but I could also be like misread because I didn't really watch this too much when I mean I would see bits and pieces of it because it was impossible in the 90s to like not have seen any amount of ER, but I don't think I ever sat down and like watched a whole episode. So I wouldn't even know, but somebody definitely got taken out by a helicopter.
They did. It's not George Clooney. It was whoever Dr. Romano was.
Dr. Romano.
Maybe they're not in the pilot. Because that's something
they're not.
I learned is that there's a lot of main characters that don't show up until later seasons.
Which is very similar to Grey's Anatomy. If you think about some of the more popular characters of Grey's Anatomy, they don't show up till later. Same with even Lost. Like Juliet ended up being one of the most popular characters. Danny in the chat is pointing out Dr. Weaver in ER ended up being a very, very popular character. She was also a very successful queer representation in television. And she doesn't show up till the later seasons. Luca doesn't show up till the later seasons. These characters that become so iconic for the series, they kind of roll in and out of the series. But let's kind of hop into the pilot itself. So you've got all this history, you've got the reality that we're going back and watching a show back then. from back in the day, over, we're talking 30 years ago. What stood out to you about this pilot? I know.
I didn't
what
like
stood
that.
out to you about this pilot? For me, specifically, the first thing that comes to mind as I was watching it, I was going, I don't think you could have showed this to me and that I would have been able to guess it was a pilot.
Yeah, and also that it works so differently than other medical shows where usually there's a through line of like one patient, you see their story fully.
Or a couple patients.
Yeah, the amount of cliffhangers with every patient. You're like, does he have cancer? I guess we'll never know.
I thought it was interesting too, because it was like these little like vignettes almost. Like you would see the doctor go treat this one patient, and sometimes the patient would come in already like knowing the doctor, and then you would ask yourself, did we see, this is such a long pilot, did I miss when this, and there's so many characters, did I miss when this character showed up earlier or something? Is there like a pre-established relationship that I'm like not remembering because I looked at my phone for a second? So like for me, it was a little bit like there were some parts where I was just like, is it the pilot or did I miss something? And I will say that was a big part for me with the Juliana Margulies character, where I didn't really understand what was going on until like way late into the episode, where I was like, oh, did she had a suicide attempt? That's what that was.
But also we don't see the end result of that either.
No idea she makes it.
So I think it's worth stepping back, and before we get into maybe talking more about it, talking a little about the history of the pilot. So I was very curious about this pilot, and I was like, okay, what are the behind the scenes trivias? Like if you look up something like The West Wing. Yes. So it was initially written by Michael Crichton, who wrote Jurassic Park, the novel.
That was
just
wild.
So you know.
That was wild to me. When I opened it, I will open up the Wikipedia page again because I was like, there are 50 characters in this thing. I don't know who anyone is. And when it was like written by Michael Crichton, I was like, the Jurassic Park guy?
And he had originally written it as a movie in memory to the fact that he used to work as an ER physician. And he approached Steven Spielberg.
That's definitely
about
a big
it.
jump. That's like, went to medical school, says, you know what? I just want to be a
novelist
about
dinosaurs.
Not for me.
But
that's a big commitment. Like I've seen like a lot of lawyers become writers, but I mean, even law school is a big commitment. And they're like, I give up. I don't want to do this anymore. That's so
after all that time.
Well, what's interesting is that he wrote it, showed it to Steven Spielberg. Spielberg was like, this is great. Like initially he had opted the script as a movie. And Spielberg was like, well, you could make this happen. I could see this doing really well. But I heard you're writing a book about dinosaurs. And Jurassic Park derailed what was then called the ED as an emergency department instead of ER. So it kind of got tabled and it got pushed back and it got pushed back. But then eventually Spielberg optioned it to some of his TV friends and eventually it got picked up. But they changed it and they kept presenting it in a few different ways. But the way that they initially decided to do the pilot was not as a strict pilot, but as a essentially 2-hour TV movie. So we have to remember that it was 90 minutes for us, but you've got commercials. In this day and age, there was no streaming. So it was a 2-hour made for TV quote movie that was essentially doubled as a pilot. It feels like that. Because
it's a 20, because honestly, I didn't connect the dots until I closed the screen of Hulu and it's called 24 hours. You're like, oh, you're just showing that they're really tired and this is the first 24 hours. But it's so interesting because, again, as a pilot, usually you kind of showcase the structure of the show. I'm like, is that the show? Is it always going to be random patients? Is it not? Are we going to follow the more Grey's Anatomy or, believe it or not, Scrubs scenario where you actually get to follow patients?
It struck me as a little bit like they were... once you understand that it was kind of a made-for-TV movie idea, it fits a lot better. It makes a lot more sense because you're following the doctors and you're following their stories and you're starting to pick up on things in that world. But I think that this is one of those pilots that is meant to emulate its subject matter. It is meant to be as chaotic and distracting and overwhelming as an ER is. It is
Yeah.
It is its own art as art. So it's kind of it's like the crazy artist who lives in the really crazy studio and draws crazy art, and you're like, oh, okay, I see it. I see that now.
Danny mentions you're all too young to remember, but the publicity for the pilot was insane. Every magazine, so many commercials. That's so interesting to know that this wasn't a sleeper hit, which I kind of got that just when I found out it was a 2-hour episode where it's like, oh,
they're
people
committing a lot of
find
time
this.
on this. Yeah.
Yeah. And also like just the quality of the episodes, it did feel very highbrow, especially the camera work. Like you're like, wow, that felt really unique. Obviously the acting's really solid. So you can tell they put a lot into it.
I thought about that too. There was one point where I was sitting there and the girl was delivering the speech about to the lung cancer guy, the whole lung cancer scene. Like that whole scene, I was sitting there watching and I was going, this is really impressive for a pilot. Like it felt a lot like something that that two scene partners had worked on all semester in an acting class and were performing at the end. Like that's the kind of scene it felt like. And there were a lot of those moments. There were so many really good character moments. It's just a disorienting hodgepodge of a pilot, but it works so well. And the medicine, oh, molto bene. The medicine is so good. It's also so weird. Some of our listeners know I work as an ER veterinary technician. So I'm a vet tech. And it's so wild to me to think about the machines that they had back then and what they had to do, like literally the anesthesia machines and the old school ventilator and the non-digital x-rays and how long it takes for those films to be processed and the labs and all. Like it was, I kept having these moments and I was like, oh my gosh, we're so advanced now. Some of the stuff that would take them much longer to do, snap for us now. Like technology is wild. But I enjoyed watching this entirely from a medical perspective because it is so accurate. That sensation
they get a lot of
like
they get consultants for these shows, and I don't know if it started with ER, probably did, but like Grey's Anatomy, they have like on the writing staff, they have literal real doctor consultants to make the medicine real. And I'm curious if this was a show that started that.
Yeah,
I don't know if it started it, but Morgan, do you have Fiona's comment? She left in the Patreon.
Mind meld, Amy. I was just going to bring it up. So Fiona in our Patreon said, I'm interested to hear your thoughts as I think it's a really solid pilot. It was filmed in an old abandoned hospital, just the pilot. And it's one medical show where the medicine is highly accurate, unlike some other cough Grey's Anatomy shows. It's an important show for me as it's one of the reasons I considered medical school, but definitely not emergency medicine if I wanted to have a life. She said she was most invested seasons like 1 through 5, and then she picked it up again seasons like 13 through 15. And then she also had a fun fact. She said, fun fact, we used to use the episode Love's Labor Lost from season 1. So that was episode 19 for an obstetric emergency training course we ran in the UK. It's a heavily obstetrics focused episode and a great example of what not to do. Laughing crying emoji.
That's so interesting.
So now she has me wanting to watch that episode just to see,
I want to go watch the rest
how
of it.
they beefed it.
You're gonna be sitting in front of your computer or TV for a while if you're gonna catch up on all of ER. But Danny says, I think it's the most expensive pilot to date, which is
oh my gosh,
kind of crazy. I'm sure at this point there has to be. Lord of the Rings, right? That Lord of the Rings TV show.
Yeah.
I wonder if you're talking like comparison, like of the time.
Sure.
To what the inflation was, which got me this episode. I couldn't handle the inflation differences when they kept talking about how like the doctors and like they were like, and this is going to cost $180 for this whole thing. And I was like,
Amy, it's so funny that you mentioned
that's your copay
because as you can see, I have an inflation calculator up on my phone.
You looked up this stuff.
I had to know. So I had to know. They offer him, one of the main characters, I think Dr. Green, a job in like a private practice at one point, and they tell him that the salary is $120,000 a year.
Mm-hmm.
I said out loud, "Oh my God!" Because that is a lot of 94 money. So in 1994, that would have been the equivalent of about $250,000 a year. And then
as much.
I think the resident said that he was making like $23,000 a year. And I also had to know how much that was. And that would have been around $48,000 a year.
So the doctor said he was making $68,000 a year. Someone else was paying $23,000 a year. But what was this? What's $68,000?
68. I am curious because I was like, you should take that job, dude. You're making a mistake. 68,000 a year would be the equivalent of about 141,000 a year in 2023 dollars. So a good salary, honestly.
A good, decent salary.
A pretty good salary, yeah. Not 250,000 though.
No. Maybe it was 23,000. I was like, that actually sounds like a much better salary. Why are they all complaining?
I think one of the residents said that he was making 23. So there definitely could have been like levels, like a newer resident versus like a established, doctor or something.
Yeah, I wonder what is the standard of like a hospital
ER
paycheck.
worker?
Yeah.
Now? Yeah, I have no idea.
With because medical school and all that, I'm guessing. Honestly, I think it is probably around the numbers you're talking about. I think it is about $250,000.
How much does an emergency physician make in my state, apparently? Whoa, okay.
Yeah, no, it's going to be high. No,
it says the range typically falls between $340,000 and $451,000 a year.
Yeah, I'm not as much as like, wow, that's a lot of money. I'm not like completely shocked.
I mean, I wouldn't want to do that job. So yeah,
it is the lifestyle. This idea of 24 hours on, 24 hours off, like this exists. This like wake me up at 6:30. Oh my god, what do you mean it's already 6:30?
More than that, like, I know I have family members that are doctors, but I've known people to work for 48 hours straight while during their beginning years of doctor work.
Or they're on call, or they literally sleep at the hospital, like they don't see family. So it's so
the beeper
accurate.
Still very much existed. Even past when the beeper should have existed. From like family members I saw, they always would have a beeper in like 2009. I'm like, what do you have this?
Are these the only beepers that still exist?
That I liked that. I liked looking at all the older technology. I was like, oh,
those are so fun. Memories.
Memories. So what stood out to you about this as a pilot? So when we look at our normal PilotPod episodes, this is a challenging one to do a true PilotPod format for, because it is kind of so all over the place. There's no really through line with the character, except I would say Dr. Green and Noah Wile's character, Dr. Carter, the new one.
Yeah.
You've got George Clooney's character.
Kind of George Clooney, but kind of not, because he starts his whole arc of being drunk, and then he's just a regular doctor after that.
And then he's just a regular doctor. He's like, that doctor has a problem. And then what was the doctor who like performs
Dr. Benton,
the resident who performed, or is what
Dr.
kind
Benton.
of full
arc?
Yeah, he got a full arc.
So you get Dr. Benton, Dr. Green, Dr. Ross, and Dr. Carter, and to an extent, you get Nurse Hathaway, because she's the one who she is there throughout it, but you don't really get a whole lot of a story with her.
Question: I don't know if you guys watch Grey's Anatomy, but when you watch, I don't watch Grey's Anatomy, but if you do,
I did.
Do you call what is the main character's names? Are they Dr. something, or are they just Jill?
Meredith.
Because Meredith.
So that's so interesting that for the ER doctors, I feel like they are like Dr. Green. I don't know if you call them by their first names. And I was thinking about like Scrubs. Again, I loved Scrubs growing up, so I will continue to reference it. But like JD,
and Turk.
And Turk, exactly. You didn't call them their last names.
Yeah, that's true.
You know what strikes me as that? As I think it was because most of the time we're hearing their names be said, it's by a nurse. Sure. And as the veterinary equivalent of that, I am very good friends with some of the vets I work with.
But you want to call them by their first name.
feels uncomfortable to say Susan instead of Dr. Heder. I can't say like Alex instead of Dr. Maiello. It's just, it doesn't work. And it's so very, very hard. So I have I think, thank you for that accuracy, nurses. So like looking at the pilot, what are things that stick out for you? What was maybe too much for you? Obviously it was a 2-hour pilot, but it was meant to have commercials. It was not meant to be binged. It was meant to have little potty breaks.
I felt like it, because there's no continuous story. Yeah, you did have to take breaks, and also like they're intense stories too, where you're like, whoa, okay, I need a little bit of a break. We just did a surgery. Like you jump a lot to different scenarios where you're like, okay, I'm gonna pause it and go to something else, and I'll play it again. Especially as you get towards the end, I just feel like it got more and more intense. The situation, like, all right, this person's stabbed, this person's this. Yeah,
I was also like, I wanted some of the stories with some of the patients felt like, is that it? Like, I'm thinking specifically of like Shuri Appleby's character, who she went on to do
Shuri wait, who was she in this?
She went on to do Roswell,
no, I know
and then Unreal. Yeah. But she was the girl who was the younger girl who was pregnant, who had the
that was her?
Ectopic pregnancy.
Ectopic.
I did not know that was her at all.
I went, Liz, because I used to love Roswell back in the day, and I couldn't believe it was her. But yeah, like she comes in, she's like, I have a pain. They're like, are you pregnant? She's like, no. And then they were like, are you sure? And she's like, no. And they're like, okay, well, looks like a pregnancy. And then you never see her again. And I was like, really? That's it?
That's the art imitating art. That's so real in the emergency world. The number of times that we get patients in at our vet clinic and we do just the initial stuff, we do the trauma, and it gets passed on either to the next shift or the next day, or it gets transferred back to their regular veterinarian. It is different in the animal ER than it is in the ER, because in the ER you have someone come in, they get stabilized, they go up to the ICU, or they go over to a different department. We are all of those, so we do get a level of closure. But I only work 1 day a week now at the vet that I'm at, and there are definitely points where I come in and I'm just hopping in the middle of the story. And that may not even be the case that I'm assigned to that day. I may end up working on a completely different case, and then I just kind of hop in every once in a while. And I'm like, okay. And it is that kind of chaos level thinking and chaos level creation that I think makes this a masterpiece. I love this idea of how the pilot is imitating the actual way that it runs by making it so impossibly real that I think the audience is supposed to be overwhelmed. I think the audience is supposed to be, so does this little lady come in all the time just because she wants friends? Is this normal to have college kids come in just because they're hoping to cop a feel? Like, is that what's going on?
The college one was the one where I was like, did I miss this character earlier in the episode?
Yeah, nope,
I felt like I had missed many things. Nope. And I was just parachuting in like halfway through some story.
Yep. And that is the life of ER anything. You are parachuting in, and even especially more so ER doctors, I would think, because the nurses are the ones who are spending a lot of time with their specific cases. Patients, they get the through line.
Yeah.
The doctors don't. A lot of times the doctors are coming in, they're like, bye.
Well, also I feel like, depends on the situation too, because when you go to the ER, you might just, again, you'd be stable and be like, all right, you just go home, but the story's not over. Like, let's say I only use this example because the only time I've been to the ER is for my kidney stones, but I get a kidney stone, right? And then I might not pass it there, but I'm not going to be staying there for 2 days. If, sometimes you just go home. Yep. So sometimes you don't get the results of it's like, did she pass it? When did she pass it? Who the hell knows? But she went home. So I feel like you never know the situation either, depending on the case of what it is. I feel like, you get passed along to your doctor, right? Primary. You might not have to be in that. Yeah. So it's interesting.
I wonder if people who are really good at compartmentalizing found this episode easier to watch. because based on my experience and based on people that I know and my own experience, medical people are necessarily experts at compartmentalizing.
Yes.
Sometimes debilitatingly.
I bet.
Yeah, as someone
Like,
who has lived that life, yes.
very
I say
good
this,
at it.
my dad's a doctor. I've never seen him cry in my life, ever.
Oh my
I've never
God.
seen my dad cry, ever. He just really, and this is not like in a, you know, be like, oh, like he doesn't show emotion, but like he's very good at
Mm-hmm.
saying, okay, yeah, this is the thing. I remember, is like kind of more of a personal story, but like when my dog passed away, I remember being like, oh man, do you think like she's gonna be okay? And my dad's like, this is this and this is that. Probably not, you know.
Yep. But that's
right?
the world though. I compartmentalize exceedingly well, to the point where I've been, been working on it, but there are like points where it catches up with them, and that's why substance abuse is such a thing in the medical world, because even in your real life you compartmentalize, and you need to not necessarily compartmentalize your real life. And so substances are the way that a lot of people get past those barriers. But for me, it's not like Kat's situation where her dad would never cry. You will never see me angry. You'll see me frustrated, and you might see me upset, but you will, like, I can count on one hand the number of people who have ever seen me like truly angry.
Well, you must have to deal with so many rude people all the time.
Mm-hmm. People making poor decisions, saying terrible things. Like, you have to. It's just something we're really, unfortunately, very good at. But it makes a different experience when watching a show like this. It makes it easy for me to watch this show and go, oh, boom, 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 snap, 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 snap. Cool. That's the world. Now, if we were watching a different pilot, if we were watching a streaming pilot, or we were watching a cop show and there were like 45 different cases, although that might actually be a really compelling show.
Although do you think that would even, I don't know how cop, reality
like,
works. Would they work on 45 cases
like
a
the
day?
bullpen? You could call it the bullpen.
The bullpen.
Let's write it. It's called
this
the
is so
bullpen.
much better than my idea for your title idea for your show, Amy, which would have been Fast Cop.
Fast Cop is much.
Fast Cop.
It's a sellable idea for sure.
He's so fast.
No, but think about it. It's called the bullpen, and it's just literally filmed in that space, and it's just people coming and going, and the cases and coming and going, and the interviews and the interrogations and the confrontations and the people reuniting and the people discovering bad things and reporting cases. Anyway,
could be good.
But I wonder if like that kind of a way that your brain works makes watching these shows different, which is then leads to my next question. Why do we think this did so well? Was it the marketing? Was it because they were like, this is the first one, and then after that it evens out a little bit?
I mean, it sounds like there was a lot of publicity for this, and I can't remember what year did Jurassic Park come out, because if Jurassic
I feel like it was
Park,
1994.
I'm gonna look it up because I feel like it was 93. So Jurassic Park had come out the year before. It was a massive hit. So I'm thinking like the Michael Crichton, Steven Spielberg of it was probably a huge part of it too, where it's like they've been, Steven Spielberg has been hit, and Michael Crichton just did this huge movie. And so they're probably like from the minds of behind Jurassic Park,
They just made it event television for sure. And I think back then event television meant something. It's interesting because you look at like,
it did.
Right? I love that analysis.
But you look at something like American Idol, right? Which I would say is the event television of the century. Like that, you're never going to have anything like American Idol. Maybe Friends. That's interesting to compare. Is Friends more event television than American Idol? But I would say American Idol was. But what's something that's interesting about that show is that it didn't become an event television until like 2 or 3 seasons later. This seems like it happened day one.
Danny said that they used Michael Crichton's name in all the publicity. And I think that makes sense. If Jurassic Park was 93 and it was huge, and then like 1 year later, it's like from the minds that brought you this giant movie everyone saw last year. I think already that's like begins the recipe for a big hit. And then they had, I don't know how well known anybody in ER was at that time, but I think they, you know, they had some people who had been on other shows. I think at this point, Clooney had been on a couple other shows, not in major parts, but probably in the 90s as you were watching, you'd be like, oh, that guy.
I did look up George Clooney because I was curious. I mean, obviously this did make his career, but I was like, oh, you know, he wasn't young. He wasn't in his
he
20s.
wasn't a complete unknown. He had been in, I think, like Roseanne at that point, a couple of like sitcoms or different TV shows.
Let's see, he was in The Facts of Life for 17 episodes.
Danny said Clooney was on Roseanne, so he was not a big name, but he was like probably somebody who, when he popped up, people would say, "Oh, I've seen him on something."
I'm curious, what did he play in Roseanne? I don't. It's been a long time. I think
he was somebody's girl. He was somebody's girlfriend. He was somebody's boyfriend. I think maybe like the daughter's boyfriend. I'm maybe making this up.
No, it looks like I never
watched a lot
Jackie's boyfriend. I mean,
okay.
You can see a lot of Jackie here. I did watch a lot of Roseanne, so that's why I was like, I don't remember that. But it's also been a very long time. Oh, he was Roseanne's boss. Okay.
Roseanne's boss. Okay. Danny says he was Roseanne's boss. I never watched much of Roseanne, so I honestly missed most of Clooney's TV work.
And Jackie's boyfriend.
and Jackie's boyfriend. Oh my God, what was going on with Roseanne?
Well, you know what's so funny about Roseanne? I don't think you guys, I mean, if you've never seen Roseanne, you probably wouldn't know this, but Roseanne's one of my favorite shows. So Danny, you'll appreciate this. In the end of the show, there was a season where Roseanne started to make things up. So
I have heard about this.
Yeah. So she like would be like, oh yeah, I won the lottery, and like all season she had won the lottery, and then she's like, yeah, like my husband had a heart attack, but he survived. And then the last episode, you find out like, you know, all those things that were so great, they were lies. Yeah, that's the whole last episode.
Doesn't it turn out that like the lottery winning season, it turns out like it was just a figment of her imagination, and
she wrote a book.
The husband actually did die, and she wrote a book. Oh my God.
And that was like the book was like that. Yeah, it's interesting.
How great my life is, and then at the end you're like, actually, it wasn't so great.
It was all fake. That's the season we don't talk about. Also, one of my favorite things as a Scrubs fan is that they replaced the daughter, whatever her name is. I forget her name, but Sarah Chalke.
Oh yeah, Sarah Chalke
plays the daughter for the most part, but then they replace her again, so they can replace her with the same actress, and they at a certain point just play the same role, and you just kind of deal with it. You're like, that's okay, incredible. These two actresses are the daughter, Becky. No, I think her name was Becky.
So good.
Anyways, ER.
What a time.
I think it's interesting that you talk about the idea of like event television, and I'm curious, and like we have these big names, and it strikes me a little bit like I was trying to think of the modern day equivalent, not necessarily of the event television. I think event television, it's different now that we have streaming.
Game of Thrones.
Like Game of Thrones. Yeah.
Yeah, Game of Thrones is probably the closest, but I don't even think it even comes close. Again, I really think the last time you had it was American Idol. That's where every single person you know was talking about it. And it's like, if you didn't watch it on time, you
I think Game of Thrones turned into that. I mean, I distinctly...
It did, but not every age range. American Idol felt like every age range was watching it.
Yeah.
That is very true.
But then I'm also trying to think of something like how the Michael Crichton thing, that just kept, people were like, oh, I'm going to watch it no matter what. And it strikes me, you know, you go back to Dr. Lawyer Cop, and I think about Dick Wolf and the Dick Wolf verse.
Yeah.
Right.
Anything Dick Wolf creates, people are like, well, I'm watching that.
What was the last thing he created since Law and Order?
They did the Law and Orders. All the Chicago shows are Dick Wolf shows.
Are they really? That's so funny.
Yeah, and it's actually, they cross over more than once, and that's fun. There have been some Chicago PD, Law and Order, SVU crossovers that are superb.
But do you think because his name was attached, people are like Chicago shows? Because I feel like it is a very specific. Because I don't think it's as big as like SVU, right? Because that's like something I'm like always
Chicago Fire
hear.
and Chicago PD do pretty good. Like they draw as much. But you think about Law and Order Organized Crime, was the one where Elliot Stabler comes back. That show's only been going on for 3 seasons, and the second they announced it, and they're like, and Elliot Stabler's coming back, and it's a Dick Wolf show, and I'm like, well, that's going to be around for another 10 seasons.
Yes.
And it's actually really good. I don't know if you guys are interested in any of that, but the Law and Order Organized Crime is actually better than SVU right now. The stories are excellent, but the crossovers are so good. I've never seen a show like a universe that does crossovers as well. If you think like, oh, the Arrowverse crossovers were good,
did anyone say the
on the Dick Wolfers.
You know what's also crazy is that Dick Wolf was involved with Hill Street Blues, which was also like a very like it was like a cop show from I guess it looks like the mid 80s, and Miami Vice, which I did not expect to be on that list. It's basically any cop show you could imagine. Dick Wolf has been involved in some way. He's just like, I'm getting in there. I'll do a Chicago Fire. I'll do a Chicago Med. I'll make an FBI show. Apparently there's like a spinoff of a bunch of FBI shows that I'd never even heard of, but there's 3 of them.
How about 911? That's another one that I'm guessing. I don't know if he was involved in that.
Somehow that is not on his list of shows.
Full disclosure, I also went straight to FBI because it was a Dick Wolf show. There's FBI, International, and FBI Most Wanted.
Wait, isn't that just the CIA?
Yes, which is why that one I watched one episode and was like, this is shit.
Like,
so you are correct.
The wrong name? I don't get it.
The FBI, straight FBI, that's got Missy Peregrine.
Right, yeah,
thank you.
From Rookie Blue.
The first 2 seasons were okay. After that, I'm watching it just out of habit because it's actually pretty terrible. The episodes are as predictable as possible.
How did this girl become such procedural? And now she's just a procedural girl. Because I remember, if you guys didn't watch Reaper, Reaper back in the day, loved Reaper. She was in that. Rookie Blue, I know is how she made her name. I watched a lot of Rookie Blue. I don't know. I think because I just really liked her. Because again, I watched Reaper. But yeah, I guess she's a Canadian actor too. I don't know if they are filmed in Canada. I know Toronto. Rookie Blue was. Okay, so that's probably why too.
The FBI's are filmed in Toronto, and it's pretty obvious because they're supposed to take place in New York, but there isn't a single large building in the shots, and it drives me up a wall. FBI's Most Wanted is actually quite good.
Is it?
Some of the episodes are shockingly good. Anyway, that one's actually very good. I watch that one regularly.
While we're off on a tangent about Dr. Laura Kopp, I wanted to know if either of you had seen that our girl Astra from Legends of Tomorrow is now a Dr. Laura Kopp. She's on a NCIS Sydney now.
I heard
there's an NCIS Sydney.
Funny. Yeah. We were watching the football game yesterday. And so I was subjected to commercials for the first time in so long. And I was like, there's an NCIS Sydney? Astra? Girl, what you doing there? So now she's in the NCIS family.
Well, because I know there was NCIS Hawaii. So they're like, you know what? And that I think does well-ish. I know there's a gay couple on it, so people are like, love that, and they're like a main character. I don't know.
Is that the Vanessa like the show that like Vanessa Lachey is on?
Let me look it up.
Or am I completely making this up? I know that she's on something, and Hawaii is maybe involved.
Let's find out.
The problem with Dr. Laura Kopp is that they all sound the same. All these shows.
She is on NCIS Hawaii.
Danny says, yes, my girl Vanessa. this is Danny, by the way, is how I know that Vanessa Lachey is on those NCIS shows.
Hawaii is the gay NCIS.
Oh my God. As we're on Dr. Laura Kopp, Michael in the chat says, if you haven't seen, Spooner is also a cop on The Rookie.
She was also a cop in Chicago PD for a season before she got onto Legends of Tomorrow.
Twist.
Well, I guess she found her niche. Was always good on just be a cop on.
Why can't we get any of the Legends of the Tomorrow people to be a doctor? Get him in the next version of
Grey's
ER.
Can you
Anatomy.
imagine Katie Lotz as a doctor? I don't know if I would be able to. I'd be like, no, this is a trick. She's not.
I could see Ava.
Constantine's going to show up.
I could
yes,
see,
I could see
Ava as like
I could see
a
Jess
doctor.
McCallan as a doctor.
Yeah. I could
So
see that.
I'm gonna pull us back into ER here. Kind of start wrapping up our discussion on it. Here's my question: is I know that we all kind of watched it sporadically in syndication when we were younger, but right now, based on this pilot, like, are you interested in watching more episodes of ER right now?
I would watch the one that Fiona mentioned just to see what they got so wrong. Yeah, I mean, I could see ER as being something that like I put on in the background while I fold laundry, but I don't know because I don't feel like my guess, and I'm not sure, is that this pilot is somewhat not indicative of like how the show is, because my guess is like this pilot was kind of written to be more like a movie and then they sort of tweaked it to be a television pilot. But I'm thinking that like a traditional television show that goes for 15 seasons like can't operate the way this pilot did, where you're just seeing like 5 seconds of somebody's like intake and then moving on, or being like, wait, why would the nurse character try to commit? Like, we don't know anything about her. Like, what happened to her?
Fun fact, she is supposed to die in the pilot, but she was so popular, it's left open-ended. She was so popular either with like the cast or the crew or the network. Like, she was just so well loved that they brought her back, but as a special guest star. She's not a regular.
Interesting. Well, it's funny. I was watching because we're slowly catching up with the morning show. So I was watching with my family, and we are up to the episode where that actor's character shows up in the morning show. My mom's like, I've seen her somewhere before. And they're like, it's ER. I'm like, damn, that's such a coincidence. I have to watch ER, and she's from ER. I didn't know that. I just knew her
so
as the
funny.
gay character on the morning show.
I mostly know her for and again, it's like TV osmosis, where I never watched the show, but there were so many commercials. But she was the main character on The Good Wife for like a long time.
That's right.
She really gets around.
She has been working.
She has definitely been working. When you talk about TV shows, I did watch a lot of Degrassi, but talking about TV shows, I feel like you never need to watch an episode for, but you could just know by commercials. I think Degrassi is a great example.
My God. Yeah. Yes. The Degrassi commercials used to be my favorite. And I watched Degrassi, but even still, I was like, yeah, tell me what's happening on this.
Well, I remember I watched Degrassi in high school, so I didn't watch it in grammar school. So I'd see a lot of those commercials. And then when I finally did watch it, I was like, oh, I feel like I've seen the show, because they really, really explained everything in that 30-second teaser. They would show. That's interesting.
What about you, Kat? Are you going to keep watching ER?
I think this was a good show, and I think unlike some of the other pilot pods we've had, where I'm like, yeah, no chance. I think if someone's like, hey, you want to watch episode 2 of ER? I'll be like, sure, why not? Would I go and watch episode 2 of ER? No. What I'm doing right now is I've decided to watch every episode of Hell's Kitchen, because surprisingly enough, I've only seen season 10 through season 22. So I went all the way back to season 1.
Oh my God.
So I'm going to go for season 1 to 9 now. And you know what's so interesting about this show? A little pilot pod for you, a little mini pilot pod within this pilot pod, is that the original show didn't have professional chefs. So they had the season 1 is Gordon Ramsay being as hard as he is on Real Chefs to people that have never worked in a kitchen. And it's so funny. No. I was like, I never knew that's what the show was. And supposedly that's the show for like 3 seasons.
He's just screaming at amateurs.
Yeah, like this one girl was just like a stay-at-home wife and a stay-at-home mom, and she got far. And then another person's just like an accountant. And he's yelling at them and be like, how do you not know how to cook this?
That's like MasterChef. So his other spin-off show. So I guess maybe he decided to like split them up, because his other show, MasterChef, it's like they're all home chefs. So it's all just big people who are like, oh, my passion is cooking, but I'm also an accountant in my day job.
Do they get their own restaurant? Because that was the promise in this
one. They do so
the promise, because what's so funny about regular Hell's Kitchen is that they get to be a lead chef at a restaurant that already exists. His promise in episode 1, season 1, is that you get your own restaurant. No You don't become a head chef. You just got to create your own restaurant.
Oh my God. It's a blessing and a curse I've given you.
Yeah, like you're a stay-at-home mom. Do you want a restaurant?
Now you need a restaurant. She's like, I'm not prepared for. I've never like run a business.
But sure. So yes, the answer is no. I will not be watching ER, but will I be continuing to watch season 1, episode 1 of Hell's Kitchen? Yeah.
I love that for you.
I will not be watching Hell's Kitchen. I thought about it, actually. I did. I think I will. I have been watching sporadic episodes of Kitchen Nightmares. That has been
What
fun.
a
Problem
turnaround.
is,
I
Kitchen
will not be
Nightmares.
watching Hell's Kitchen. I've been thinking about it. Maybe I will.
I don't know. Look, now that my show is over, I have an excess of free time, which
It's
really
easy.
isn't actually an excess of free time. It's rather a return to a marginally normal person's schedule. So it's a lack of it's a lack of no free time is what I have. It's not free time.
But it feels
It's
like
just-
a lot of free time to you at this point now.
Really does. I haven't even caught up yet. Like I haven't slept really since we ended the show. Anyway.
Well, after you sleep, watch some Hell's Kitchen. It's really
Maybe I will.
cathartic.
Maybe
It's
it's
a good show.
cathartic.
Yeah.
I actually might continue watching ER. And one of the main
I see that
reasons
for you.
is
You watched some of it already.
no, I'm trying to remember Luca's character. So Luca Kovac shows up, and it was Luca and Abby. That was the girl's name.
I remember
Luca and
they were a
Abby's
big
character
deal.
relationship. Yes, they were a big deal. I want to get into that. There's Lucy and Carter. There's 2 characters. Like there's just Dr. Weaver. There's a lot of characters that I remember from my youth. I would like to watch again as an adult. I don't know if I'll watch all of it, but I'm definitely going to watch the second episode, largely because I am curious if it settles, if it's not quite so chaotic. I am genuinely curious, and I will let you guys know if it ends up
definitely
being
do,
that
because
the
I was
pilot
also
or was
that
not
was
indicative of the series.
that was also something that I would like. Maybe like one of the main reasons like I would watch episode 2. It's just like, yeah, okay,
Curiosity.
like yeah, pilots are usually back in the day. Now sometimes shows are just ordered right through, and like the pilot is just episode 1. But it used to be that like pilots were like sometimes filmed months before the rest of the show.
Well, they
and,
were
like,
pilot season, yeah.
pilot season, so they would film these pilots, they would bring them out, they would test them, they would tweak stuff. And I think Fiona even mentioned only the pilot was filmed in that decommissioned hospital, so the rest of it is going to be like, you know, kind of remaking that hospital on like a stage or something. So yeah, I would imagine that like episodes like 2 and 3 start to feel pretty different from what the pilot was, because the pilot was kind of almost like a movie that they converted into a TV pilot, and TV pilots are often not like that close, as close to the rest of the show. So I would be interested to see like what mid-season ER is actually like.
I would be interested in maybe seeing the clips of like the big moments, right? Again, the helicopter thing that's kind of planted in my brain.
You want to know what's open in my tabs right now? The helicopter scene.
I'm sure. Yeah. Like those are
I will
things I'm
send
like,
you
oh, I
guys
wanna
the
watch
link.
that.
I'll send you the link for the stabbing scene, because it's, I think
You
the
just don't
two
want
of
us
you.
to sleep.
No, it's not that. It's the composition of the way that they do it, and you will understand while I watch it. It's the choice of sound editing. I'm not going to say any more than that. It's the way that they choose to do the scene. It's iconic when you watch it now and you know what's going to happen. I cannot imagine. I mean, we think about, it's so strange to think about a show back in that day where you had to wait a week to see a new episode, where there was no spoilers, no Instagram, no TikTok. There was nothing. You were as spoiler free as possible. And then it fades to black, goes on to the next show, and you got to wait a week with
You're just
nothing.
You're just screaming at the
No
screen.
behind the scenes, nobody running onto the sets and like sneaking photos on their TikTok. Danny in the chat says, I still can't watch the stabbing scene. I know it's not even violent or gruesome. You don't actually see the physical stab. That's where it's also so artistic. You don't actually see the, but you
network TV too.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. But man, it's I'll send it to you guys because it's really well done. But it was such a different era of television.
I will say also that something that was interesting watching this episode. I almost couldn't believe it was I think NBC, right? Network television in general. Like, it's just like, oh, wow, this, again, feels very highbrow for network television.
It did
Very
really.
highbrow.
Very, like, it felt expensive, like that pilot. I wasn't surprised that it was an expensive pilot.
They did avoid a lot of the things that NBC can get away with now. So on Chicago Med, Chicago Fire, Chicago PD, say they're doing some sort of chest tube. They can put the tube in and blood just gushes out everywhere. But in this scene, when he cuts into the stomach with the aneurysm,
you don't see it.
He's like, oh, look at all that blood. And I was like, I'm going to just imagine your hands are swimming in blood right now. You're like, oh, God, it's everywhere.
You see it on, like, the...
After. But you don't see it gushing.
No.
Whereas now NBC can get away with straight up, oh, it got in my face. Like...
that one patient did cough blood all over Clooney.
That is true.
Clooney's like, oh.
He's like, yeah, it's fine. All right. I think that's going to wrap up our discussion of the pilot pod for ER. I know it's very weird. It's an interesting pilot pod, but I like the conversations we got into because I think the person you are does affect the way that you can watch this kind of a pilot. And I almost now feel nostalgic for those days where you could just not risk any spoilers. It was just it was spoiler-free universe.
What a time. What a time.
A long time ago.
Thinking about it. Now it's like something airs and like, or Netflix will drop a show at like 3 a.m. and in the next morning you're like, oh, I can't go on Twitter because there's spoilers everywhere from the people who decided to stay up until like 4 to, finish something.
Although I feel nostalgic to the days when we cared about a show that much that was airing at 3 a.m.
Oh, that's so true. Yeah, there's nothing I would stay up until 3 a.m. to like catch the first episode of. I'd be like, whatever, I'll catch it in a day or so.
Well, I remember even like Orange New Black was a big show where I was like, I can't wait for this new season. And obviously like the Marvel shows, but especially Orange New Black was one I remember. I remember there was one season that they knew we really wanted to watch and they actually aired it a few hours early and we didn't have to stay. It was like 11 or 12 instead of 3 a.m. and all right, here you go.
that was, I remember I used to like some of the things would drop and I would like, that's going to be my whole weekend. I'm going to watch every single episode like as soon as I can. And now I'm just like, whatever, I'll get to it when I get to it.
Yeah, there's too much television. I really can't think of any show I'd get that excited for. Maybe Hell's Kitchen, but
I'm gonna stay up till 3 a.m. Gordon.
It's like I know the recipe, but I need more of it. So Morgan, I think we have a couple of comments, right, that we were going to read.
Oh yeah, so I read Fiona's comments, but we actually did. Since we wrapped up spooky season last week, we have a leftover spooky suggestion. This one is from Daryl, who said, "Only Lovers Left Alive. This is an excellent movie, perfect for the spooky season, starring Tom Hiddleston and Tilda Swinton with Mia." Oh, I am so bad at pronouncing her last name. Wasikowski. In a supporting role that came out 2 years before Crimson Peak. So seems like there was a movie with Tom and Mia in it 2 years before Crimson Peak that was also spooky. So I guess they just vibed together.
To be continuously spooky.
They just got to be spooky every couple years, I think.
But thank you for the recommendation.
Yeah. And, we say this all the time, but if you have some suggestions on stuff that we should talk about or stuff that we should watch or know, you can always send that to thelegendaryladies@gmail.com, or you can tweet us at legends_podcast, or leave a comment on our YouTube channel, The Legendary Ladies, or on Instagram, The Legendary Ladies. And we're always looking for good topic suggestions. So we will often take it. This ER pilot pod was suggested by Fiona, I believe. And this was really fun.
I was on mute. I kept trying to unmute myself.
I was like, is Amy talking?
No, we're here. No, we're here. We're just we were compartmentalizing. No. So let's start wrapping up. Let's run around the room real fast.
Michael actually had a pilot pod request as well.
Michael, drop it in the chat. I don't remember what your pilot pod request was.
Yeah, let us know that we could actually get it going.
Put it on the list.
Remember. So let's go around the table real fast and say what we've all got going on. I am done with my show right now. I don't know what to do with my life. it was we're going to do a Patreon about it sometime down the line once I've had time to like sit and process, but it was one of the single greatest theater experiences I've ever had.
Oh, yay.
It was absolutely everything I wanted and more. Not a lot of people do this, but I know this, but I love theater for theater's sake, and I love acting. But one of the main reasons I got back into theater as an adult is because I've been chasing this sensation that I had when I was a kid in some of these shows of finding that like found family in theater, and this cast was that. Like, I cannot express how beautiful of an experience the cast and crew was for this show. And like, I have made friends for life, and it was like coming back every week to, you know, start a new weekend of shows was like coming home. It was just so wonderful, and I can't wait to talk about it for our Patreon listeners later down the line. But I don't know what to do with myself right now. I don't have rehearsals 6 days a week or performances 7 hours a day. So I don't know what to do. I actually do. I'm going to exercise and hang out with my dog who has missed me.
I bet. Michael said that's his favorite part about theater too.
It is. It is. Once you've had one experience of this sensation of like a found family moment with a cast, or even just a scene partner, you chase it. And every theater experience that doesn't fit it could be fun, but it just misses the bar. And so I am so exceedingly thrilled that this show in particular, with how special it is to me and my family, was the one where we found that again. And it was so well received. We got great reviews, like amazing reviews. People loved it. So much fun. People were like, why are we not doing more of this? Like, you guys should keep going. And we're like, no, going into November doesn't really quite fit for the Headless Horseman, Sleepy Hollow. So we'll come back next year. Kat, what do you got going on? You got any
any
Kickstarters?
Yes, we just launched one today. So we have Slice of Life, our webtoon, our gay webtoon. We did a new reader-friendly anime parody book. So if you guys don't know what Slice of Life is about, it's about an anime character comes to life, falls in love with a cheerleader. So we did the reverse of that. So all those characters go into your favorite animes: Pokemon, Dragon Ball Z, Sailor Moon. So if you want to check it out, that's running for all of November. So yeah, November. I'm like, what month are we in? Yes. So go check that out.
That sounds really fun. You can find me as a co-host on Supergirl Radio, as well as this podcast. Supergirl Radio, I think we're going to do a deep dive into the comics for the next couple of weeks when Supergirl was a soap opera actress. So I haven't read any of these. So Rebecca, who is actually a soap opera fan, is going to tell me all about Kara's foray into being a soap opera actress. So I think that should be very fun. So we always record usually like 9 p.m. Eastern on Tuesdays. So stop by and say hello and find out more about her life, Supergirl's life as a soap opera star.
That sounds fun. It does sound like a fun concept.
I did want to say that Michael's suggestion was Lupin on Netflix, which I've actually watched and is excellent. So I'm going to have to second his suggestion. It's a good one.
We will definitely officially add it onto the list. And if you guys become a patron, you can suggest episodes too, and we most likely will do them. So definitely suggest a way. But yeah, Michael, we will, like I said, we'll put it on the list, and we'll have it scheduled. We're actually probably going to do our scheduling right after this, so we have to.
Fun.
This was the last thing that was in our pre-scheduling. There's nothing else scheduled yet.
All right. I think that's going to close us out. Friendly reminder, you guys can find us on Patreon. Search The Legendary Ladies. We are going to be rolling out some new Patreon features very shortly here. You can also find us on Instagram, The Legendary Ladies, on Twitter, Legends_podcast. Find us on iTunes, Stitcher, wherever you download your podcast, Google Podcast. You can even ask Alexa, what's going on? Oh no, she just talked.
Uh-oh.
She heard me.
Don't ask.
Don't ask her.
It's okay, Alexa. But thank you all for listening. If you like our podcast, leave a 5-star review. Email us, thelegendaryladies@gmail.com. Let us know what you want to listen to. Do you find the ER pilot easy to watch? Is the ER pilot challenging for you to watch? Are you a medical professional? Do you agree with our analysis? Is this something that hit the mark for you, or was it too much for you to watch? Let us know. Email, share your thoughts. We'd love to hear your feedback. But that's going to wrap it up for this podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a wonderful week and stay legendary.